Welcome to the Crocodile School podcast with Hylke Faber, transformational coach and founder of Growth Leaders Network, an award-winning author of Taming Your Crocodiles, and Carson Heady, best-selling author of Salesman on Fire and sales director at Microsoft, as they explore together how we stay connected to and lead from our best selves. Where do we find the wherewithal to choose again and respond from our best selves, instead of giving into fear-based reactivity, especially when challenged? How do we tame our crocodiles, those fear-driven voices that want to protect our ego at all cost? How do we become what we would like the world to become? Allow yourself to become present and enjoy this episode of the Crocodile School podcast.
Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Crocodile School podcast. Today, we're going to explore finding our fearless calling, which is based on Chapter 2 from Taming Your Crocodiles. My name is Carson, Heady, and I'm joined today by Hylke Faber. Hylke, how are you?
I'm good and very glad to be here today with you, talking about our fearless calling. I was thinking about this morning and thinking about how grateful I am for calling and intentionality as a really good friend to help me navigate and help us navigate through what's going on in life and leadership. So nice to be here with you.
Very good. Hey, I look forward to our discussion as I always do. I always walk away from these refreshed and illuminated, and I hope the same can be said for our audience. I always like to dive into the text, and so if you'll indulge me, I'm going to point out a couple of the key pieces that jumped out at me throughout this, and then I would love to dive into some questions. And really, for me and my journey, because the audience is living this right along with me, for me, it's always about, what does this mean for me? How can I apply it to where I am? And where can I also look back at some of the perhaps key learnings that I've had along the leadership journey? So for me, it all comes down to, and this is kind of how Chapter 2 is prefaced, is connecting to true purpose, right? So understanding what is that, and also understanding the difference between your purpose and a borrowed purpose, which is often where we wind up, right? We end up chasing someone else's priorities. And so these were two of the quotes that really stood out to me. When you wake up in the morning, do you have a sense what you aspire your day to be about? Do you have a sense of purpose, or are you reacting to what shows up in your inbox or on the screen of your mind? The tasks, feelings, and ideas that are there when you wake up. Having a sense of purpose can help us focus. Now, every morning I get up, I kind of carve out, whether it's on the treadmill or as I'm going into my day, what are my non-negotiables for the day? And I try to stay tried and true to that, but I'm guilty of it as everyone is. We get pulled in a lot of different directions. It's easy to get sucked into the minutia. So I'm interested in your thoughts on that piece. The other quote, before I go into some questions, that really resonated with me is, we're influenced by other people's priorities, often without realizing it. Let's reflect for a moment. What do we learn about our purpose from our families, schools, jobs, friends, and the wider world? We receive tons of messages from the tribes we live in. Here are a few. To survive, you need to be busy. To belong, you need to conform and not rock the boat. To be successful, you need to be better than others and make lots of money. To learn, you need to get to know the answers fast, and to be worthy, you need to be special. When I was reading this book for the first time, and frankly, the second time, Hylke, those words rang very, very true for me, because I live that every day. And I know you did as well. I really appreciate your story that you share throughout Taming Your Crocodiles. But how does having a calling, how does that ultimately help us?
Yeah. So I appreciate the way in which you reflect on this today, because it really is worthy of reflection if you think about it. Because the choice we have is to go on autopilot and just go and join the mind stream of whatever's coming through, right? Whether it's triggered by our inbox, or even before we see anything, by whatever is coming up into our mind. And what I noticed is that when we sit still, which is a practice I like to do in the morning, I just like to sit for about half an hour every morning and just meditate and just be still and sit with that question: what is truly important for me? I noticed that there are different layers. There's like the habitual thoughts, like of what I should do or what I should be anxious about or what I maybe am excited about. But then there's often more of a quieter layer underneath that that has less to do with what's happening in the particular day and is something that's much more, you could say, eternal, always and already. It's something that's always with me. And I've gotten very interested in this question of what is always and already in me. As you know, I almost became a monk at some point. I spent a lot of time just in quiet, and I fell very much in love with this always and already, which you could say is something that we could call presence, being in the moment. Maybe something about peace or unconditional love or quiet, uh, or a sense of centeredness, or maybe even we talk about it as higher self, whatever words resonate with you. And what I found is that as a human being and as a leader, it is not only nice, but almost like a requirement for a good life to know what my priorities are, that you could say cut through some of the stuff that goes through my mind, because what goes through my mind is very unpredictable. You see, I have a good day, I have a bad day. Like last week, I got COVID. Well, my body was saying all kinds of things, and it wasn't very nice, right? And so if I am caught in my cross purpose, you could say my borrowed purpose of I have to be successful, I have to be on top of the world, or I have to feel good all the time, or uh, then it's a losing proposition. And when I just quieted down, it's interesting. I talked about this with my teacher and asked myself, what is it that I'm truly about? Well, what I'm truly about is being truthful and being in peace and extending love to myself and others. Well, then COVID becomes an exercise in humility because it means a lot of letting go, sleeping, resting, canceling things. I had to cancel a workshop last week, which I found really challenging to do. My ego found. But for my true purpose, it felt more like something, yeah, well, this is what your higher self is asking for now. So
Something that, I mean, I'm going to sound like a broken record here because I keep talking about what resonates with me, but this chapter is so good. Something that really resonated with me here was how you really shared your story. And I think it mirrors a lot of us. We feel like we have a calling or an inkling towards something, and we're almost like a pendulum swing sometimes, right? We're like, hey, this isn't working for me, so I'm going to gravitate toward this, which is almost like the polar opposite, when in fact, that's not the right approach. There may be some elements over here that we want to incorporate into our lives, but it's really more about getting closer to center, closer to balance.
yes.
And I think that's where often we can struggle. But I think it all starts with, how do we find our calling? And so, I'm curious, and I'm sure our listeners are as well, especially if we're struggling with a lot of these things that you've articulated today, which I know we all are. How can we, amidst all that noise, how can we find our true calling?
Yeah. So you've heard this being said many times, like it is a journey. And one of the things that I think we have is very precious as human beings is time and attention. So think about like when you are in a picture, a group picture, and you're in that picture. We may have talked about this before. Now, what's the person you're naturally going to look at first in this group picture? And admit it, it's probably yourself, right? And we know this. So there's an intrinsic interest in what we are. And so, as opposed to calling that bad or narcissistic or egoic, we could say, well, that's part of our human being. Part of our wiring is set up to find out who we are. I actually think working with leaders, one of the greatest service I can do is help the person to figure out what they're truly about and help them find some time with themselves and spend some time with that. So how do we find our calling? Is one way is to create space for it and to really, really listen. Now, this doesn't mean needing to go on retreats for years or months or weeks or days. It can be that. Some people do that. Many of the great teachers, some of them left for 40 days or they go to the mountains. But what I find is sticking ourselves out of the, you could say, busyness of our lives, taking a walk in nature, spending some time in reflection, writing, and starting to listen to that little deep, still voice inside and just sit with the question like, what am I really about? What is always and already true about me? And how can I bring that more to the foreground? And this is not like a big transformational dramatic thing. It can be very, very simple, right? So it could be, I'm about being peaceful, or I'm about extending love, or I'm extending my best, or and then we might find as different kinds of callings. There's callings that are always and already, and then there's callings that are more situational, you could say. So another leader that I work with, Renee Joachim, asks sometimes herself, like for a meeting, what am I called to do and be in this meeting? So we can then translate our always and already purpose into this situation. Like, what am I called to be now? So, for example, last week, COVID hit. My overall purpose is to be my true self. Now, when COVID hits, what's my true self called to be then? Well, one that rests, takes lots of fluid, takes care, that. So that is, we could say, a way, just by spending some time, by anchoring in what is always and already. And then once we've got more depth in that, ask ourselves in the situations, from this particular place that I'm in now, this station that I'm at now in life, how am I called to serve? And I think that's another part of it. Purpose, as we'll discover as we go more into it, has a lot to do with service, extending. Like there's something about it's like innately, but when you find something beautiful, our innate desire is not to keep it to ourselves, right? It is to want to share it. So it's find it and share it. And sometimes we find it by sharing it. That's another way of finding our purpose, by being of service.
Something that I'm hearing that's very poignant. I love the angle of service, because I think that can beget some very rewarding and fulfilling relationships and parts of the journey. But another piece that really resonated with me here was that very often it's the opposite approach of what we actually wind up taking. It's getting some distance from it all, because a lot of us are going very, very strong and driving hard with what we're good at or what we know. And we don't stop and take that time to pause and reflect on how we're showing up and how these contributions, are they fulfilling? Are we serving in the best way possible? We're in back-to-back meetings. We're getting zero distance from it all and burning ourselves out, right? I mean, and you're running at 60, 70% of capacity in a meeting when you could take a pause, take a breath, reflect, think fully about your role, and be at 100%. Before we go to break, and look, Taming Your Crocodiles is all about unlearning fear, right? So it struck me that you call this a fearless calling. Why do you call it that, Hylke?
So once we find something beautiful and in ourselves, it often has to do with the heart. It's like, this is so beautiful. Like, this peace that I'm finding, or this truth that I'm finding, or this insightfulness that something that wants to be shared. right? Now, our wiring as human beings is primarily not about our calling, right? Our wiring is primarily about our survival. And with survival comes fear. Because if I'm all about survival, my primary concern is death. Like, and that could be physical death, but also in our day-to-day egoic death. Like, I'm afraid of not looking good. Let's say, for example, last week, like, being truthful meant resting and canceling workshop. That was fearless. It was interesting. My assistant said, "That was very brave of you that you canceled the workshop." Hard for me to do. Why? Because part of me is afraid of letting go of the self-image of being the invincible one, the strong one, or the one that just impresses clients because I've always got it together, right? I gotta always got it together. So the fearlessness comes in is by being willing to face our inner egoic images and call their bluff and say, yeah, I know that you want me to do XYZ, be perfect, please others, be the best, be invincible, or always be a victim, or whatever it might be, whatever the patterning might be, and just call a bluff and say, you know what? I have other priorities, because being truthful to our calling requires us to say no. No, not that. I'm not doing that today. I know I think that, I feel that, but no, I am not doing that today.
And that's an important statement because it's usually unfamiliar or uncomfortable muscle that we have to flex or develop in order to have that. I've found personally that in every relationship, I bring my armor and my survival methods. That relationship doesn't reach its full potential, period, regardless of what I've been programmed to do all my life or all my career. So we're going to take a brief break, and then we'll come back, and then we do my favorite part of the program where Hylke and I work together on something I'm grappling with. So we'll see you soon.
You are listening to the Crocodile School podcast, where we are exploring connecting deeply to our true selves, especially when challenged. If you would like to learn more about leadership and team connectedness and taming the crocodiles that get in the way of leading from our true selves, please contact Growth Leaders Network on LinkedIn. And now back to the Crocodile School podcast with your hosts, Hylke Faber and Carson B. Heady.
Okay, so welcome back. Hylke, this is my favorite part. Anything you want to say to tee us up before I get vulnerable?
Well, I love that you're being vulnerable the whole time, Carson. So I don't think it's a beginning of vulnerability. I think part of your fearless calling might be about being vulnerable, but we'll find out. We'll find out. One thing I want to highlight from the first conversation that we just had, the first part of the conversation, is that getting in touch with our calling requires attention. And it's not a once and done. It's also something that we continue to deepen, because we have these words, like I have words like peace or presence or love, but these words mean something very different for me now that I'm 50 from what they used to mean to me when I was 35, when I first started to really think about those words. So it's like life as a way of teaching us, and something comes online, and then we find maybe it's the same words or different words for it. So I think that's something to keep in mind. It's like using being in touch with our calling like an artist, allowing it for it to merge and allowing it to become richer and richer. So having said all that, Carson, let's think a little bit about how we apply fearless calling in your life and leadership. So, as always, my first question to you is, what's a challenge you're facing today?
Thank you, Hylke. I get antsy. I feel like I've identified elements of my calling, and I do think that's important, that what you just pointed out. It's in the text as well, of how calling can evolve over time. And as I've spent many years in my career in leadership and in sales, I'm community builder. I'm a communicator. I'm an orchestrator. I like to orchestrate and organize, community and serve, whether it's customers, whether it's partners, whether it's internal constituents. It's always important to make sure that we're doing everything we can to deliver and to achieve optimum value. But I get antsy. I never feel like I'm optimally living my purpose. I always feel like there's something more I could or should be doing. Like I should always be active. Because of that, and we've talked about this before, I can be my own worst critic. I can't sit still. I feel guilty if I try to take a step away, like I'm letting someone down. And I think sometimes I even question my calling. Do I have it right? Is there something different that I should be doing? Should I be serving more people? Should I be serving them in a different way? So I feel like I found elements of my calling, and I think a lot of us do, right? But I always question if I'm really truly showing up with purpose and delivering value optimally.
Yeah. Great observation that there's this antsiness of more, which I'm sensing many people, including myself, can relate to. So let's unpack this a little bit and let's take a look at your calling, right? So the pieces of which you can see now, right? So I think I heard you say your calling is something about building community and bringing people together. So say a bit more about today on October 25th, 2022. How would you describe what your calling is?
I always try to ask myself, what do I feel like I'm uniquely qualified for, or what is kind of my unique differentiator or superpower? And so, I felt like I'm great at building community, getting people in the boat, getting people actively engaged around a cause. Whether it's internal, folks to my company to work on a project, to finding different influencers within a customer organization with which to partner and collaborate. So I always feel like I'm a community builder, an orchestrator of team, of projects, things of that nature. Those are the things that I feel are unique differentiators that I do exceptionally well.
Beautiful. So there's something about building a community, bringing people together. Now, why is that important to you? Why is building community and bringing people together, why is that important to you?
I've always tried to solve problems based on resources that are at my disposal. And so in every role that I've ever been in, I found success, but only because I'm very resourceful. I'm never the smartest person in the room. I just needed to go out and find out who are those smart people. So for me, it's important to build community around a cause or solving a problem. And so I'll look at each problem individually. Whether it's, we need to have more executive relationships with our customers today, or it could be from a leadership standpoint. We need to recruit very effectively, amidst the fight for talent and things of that nature. And so whatever those problems are, I look at all the resources at my disposal and I will go out and eliminate that problem.
So you like to build community to solve problems, right? To solve problems, to create solutions. And I hear you being really passionate about that. So why is that important to you? Why is it important for you to create solutions together?
Because I want to make a difference. I think we all find these things that we are good at or that we have a passion for. And these are the things that not only do they fulfill me, I love doing them. I light up. Like even if one of my kids kept me up all night, like I light up when I'm having these conversations or training someone or a group of people or solving these problems. These are the things that just energize me like nothing else. But at the same time, Hylke, they really truly make me feel like I'm living my purpose and that I'm making meaningful contributions for other people. A lot of, and I think a lot of us, we get caught up in some of the day to day, which isn't, the minutia isn't fulfilling. It can drain us. And those are the types of things that I think can detract from that feeling. So I think I'm just always trying to find that, am I delivering optimal value and am I living my purpose today? And when I feel like I am, great. When I feel like I'm not, that's when I struggle greatly.
Yes. So notice that in this current version of the purpose, there is a degree of conditionality. It's like sometimes you do it and sometimes you don't. And it's never enough. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Yeah. So your level of ANSI is a direct correlation to the conditionality that's in your purpose right now, right? So there's something about this purpose is conditional on something else, right? Now, what's the impact on you of having a purpose that is not entirely unconditional, i.e., it's still dependent on outside circumstances and outcomes? What's the impact on you?
Feel like you're always chasing something. You feel like you're never quite reaching what you're seeking to find.
Yeah. So you're never good enough.
Never good enough.
Never good enough. And it sounds so noble. Like, I'm here to solve problems, together with others. It's not even egoic like me, Carson. It's like, no, I'm solving problems with others. And I'd like to make a difference. And that is so beautiful also. So that just notice that it's beautiful, and yet it's maybe incomplete. And maybe there's a level deeper that may help you to get to a place of more stability and centeredness, right? So if you were to transform or evolve this conditional calling, which is about bringing people together to create solutions and to make a difference, what would be an unconditional calling in this case? What can you commit to no matter how you feel, what happens, whether you solve things or not?
Well, I've got a cheat code there because I can go to your text. And so I know the answer. It's about being present and bringing my best self to every situation and finding contentedness and peace in that. And I think that's the biggest thing that I struggle with, is always wondering, there's a lot of fear of missing out. Am I missing out on an opportunity to deliver value for someone or solve a problem?
Yes.
We've delved into this before too, which hence why I say yes to a lot of opportunities, not wanting to let others down, not wanting to let myself down, not wanting to cut off the potential for a wonderful experience or relationship. And so it always leaves you, chasing more. But I think one of the things that you said in chapter 2 was specifically, I can't control how others show up. I can't control a lot of the variables, but I can control how I am present in those situations that I am afforded.
So you can control how you show up, basically, how present you are. And by the way, there's no right answer to this question, right? Just because I wrote that in the book, that's something I choose. This is really about your soul value. What is always and already true about Carson, no matter what, that gives you energy? What would that be?
That I care, that I want to deliver genuine value and be fulfilled by the relationships that are a result.
So I deeply care. I'm committed to deeply caring. Try that on.
I'm committed to deeply caring.
What's that like?
It's actually freeing.
Because
that's easy. Because that comes with the territory for me. Yes.
So it's natural. Now, that's still a lot of homework, because let's make this practical, right? So being deeply caring, and let's take an integral perspective, meaning to the I, the we, and the it, to you, to your relationships, and to your effectiveness. So you have a challenge you've been talking about is like, I've got a lot to do and to prioritize. So being deeply caring, how can you apply that deep purpose to that?
I think it's being selective in what you invest in and how you invest in it. I even think about personal relationships. I'm deeply caring in some relationships, and but I can't control how the person on the other side is going to take that or show up in any given day. Same thing with some of the projects that I invest my time and energy into. I can't control the outcome, but I can control the inputs, and I can control how present I am in those moments. And frankly, I think that's empowering. I've tried to build the very basis of a lot of my life on controlling the controllables. And, as hard as that, as easy as that is to say, and sometimes it's easier said than done, I think it's important to come back to that frequently, especially when it may be all the more when you are being pulled in 1,000 different directions.
Beautiful, beautiful. So this sense of when I'm facing a challenge, your calling. Your calling, whether you're facing a challenge or not. My calling is I am deeply caring. And that can require a lot from you to do that. That can require a lot to do that. And also, what does it require you to say no to?
Things that are not going to live that calling. Things that are not going to live the calling of solving problems and forging meaningful relationships.
Yeah. So there's an edge to it. There's an edge to it. Like people who are purposeful often have some oomph to them because they're clear about what they're about, and they're also clear about what they're not about. Right? So thank you for sharing that today.
Thank you. I know we are coming close to time. So Hylke, I'd love to have you share any last thoughts on chapter 2 and finding your calling and finding your purpose before we sign off today.
Yeah. So I invite you to reflect on what you could say is our shadow purpose for a moment, which is the purpose that is more based upon fear and outcomes, and whether that really works for you, right? So if I think about my shadow purpose might be about being the best or pleasing everyone. And when I really follow that purpose, when I look at that movie, I notice that I'm actually not my best, and I'm actually not really helping people, right? I'm actually giving them a surrogate of what I truly am. So then the other way could be to say, I noticed that. That's not bad. It's just a different experience. But as opposed to giving people my surrogate, which doesn't work for me or for them, what is it that I truly want to contribute today? What is that? And am I willing to take a risk, to therefore say no to what is not that?
My key learning from today, I think what resonated most with me was hearing you talk about getting some distance from not necessarily even the problem, but current state, especially if you see that there is something else that you want to, incorporate into your day to day. So getting some distance from that so that you can think about your calling. And if you've arrived at your calling, how you can hone that calling. Apply some discipline and methodology to how you manage your time and how you say yes and no to things around if you're living your calling or not. And also realize that where you're going doesn't look the opposite of where you are now. It just means taking some things about where you want to be and incorporating them into your life so that you can more truly live your calling. So thank you all for joining the Crocodile School podcast today. It's a great session. Today we talked about finding and honing your calling and your purpose. Next time we're going to explore chapter 3 from Taming Your Crocodiles. And we're going to continue to look at how we can grow through challenges, transforming crocodiles into owls. So please join us next time at the Crocodile School podcast. You can also join for a monthly live Growth Leaders Network community conversation. Look for these community conversations on LinkedIn. And thank you again for joining Hylke and me today. Hylke, we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Carson, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you for joining the Crocodile School podcast with your hosts Hylke Faber and Carson V. Heady. Take a moment to pause and appreciate something about yourself. And enjoy taming your crocodiles, growing more and more into your true potential. See you next time at the Crocodile School.